Welcome to The Great Debate, the podcast where we delve into the issues that have shaped our nation's history. I'm your host, Shaheer, and today we are exploring one of the most continuous topics in American history, gun control. Our guests today represent two contrasting perspectives that have been part of the ongoing debate since the birth of our nation. On one side, we have Pat, a staunch Federalist, and on the other side, we have Ronnie, an ardent Anti-Federalist. Let's get started. Now, Pat, as a Federalist, you believe in a strong central government. Can you explain your position on gun control?
Thank you for having me, Shaheer. Indeed, Federalists like me support a strong central government because we believe it can better protect the rights and safety of all citizens. When it comes to gun control, we advocate for reasonable regulations to ensure firearms are in the hands of responsible individuals, keeping society safe.
I understand that. I understand your view now. Now, Ronnie, as an anti-federalist, your viewpoint opposes centralized power. How do you see gun control in this context?
Well, first of all, Shaheer, it's a pleasure to be here. And anti-federalists like me are concerned about the potential for the government overreach and the infringement on individual liberties. We believe that gun ownership is a fundamental right, and excessive government control over firearms poses a threat to our freedom.
Okay, I see now. It's clear that both of you guys have strong convictions. Patty, what kind of regulations do you believe are reasonable?
Well, Shaheer, Federalists generally support background checks, waiting periods, and restrictions on certain types of firearms. These measurements can help prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands while still allowing responsible citizens to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
Now, Ronnie, what is your perspective on these regulations?
While it's crucial to keep these firearms out of the wrong hands, we anti-federalists fear that such regulations may be used to erode our rights over time. We believe in the individual's right to bear arms for self-defense and as a safeguard against government tyranny.
Okay, bearing arms, what a topic to bring up, Ronnie. Now, the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which protects the right to bear arms, is the heart of this debate. Now, Pat, how do you interpret the Second Amendment in a Federalist context?
The Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms as part of a well-regulated militia. We interpret this to mean that while individuals have the right to own firearms, the government has a role in ensuring responsible gun ownership through reasonable regulations.
Ronnie, your thoughts on the Second Amendment?
The Second Amendment, in our view, recognizes the individual's right to own and carry firearms, and it's not limited to a military context. We believe that any government regulation infringing upon this right is unconstitutional.
It's clear that the divide on this issue runs deep. Pat, how do you respond to concerns that government overreach could lead to tyranny?
We must strike a balance between individual liberty and public safety. While we understand the concern about government overreach, we believe that a well-regulated system can prevent such abuses and protect the broader community from gun violence.
Okay, Ronnie, how do you address concerns about gun violence and safety?
We, anti-federalists, believe that the answer lies in responsible gun ownership and personal accountability. We must encourage responsible behavior and self-regulation within society rather than relying on government mandates.
Now, Pat, you've mentioned that Federalists support background checks and waiting periods. Can you please provide some historical context for these measures?
Certainly, Shaheer. The idea of background checks and waiting periods has its roots in addressing concerns about public safety. It's essential to remember that in the early days of our nation, firearms regulations varied widely from state to state. As our society became more interconnected, it made sense to have some consistent rules in place to ensure that firearms didn't end up in the wrong hands.
Now, Ronnie, how do anti-federalists perceive the historical context of gun control measures?
So, from our perspective, Shaheer, historical context is crucial. We acknowledge that regulations have evolved over time, but we remain very wary of overreach. We've seen how governments can use seemingly innocent regulations to gradually restrict individual rights, and that's something we must guard against. For example, we see the historical U.S. versus Lopez case where Congress's power was struck down as unconstitutional when they made gun regulations under the Commerce Clause. This supports the argument that gun control should be left to the states to decide.
So, what you both are saying is that the role of the federal government in gun control is a central point of contention. Pat, can you expand on the Federalist view regarding federal government involvement?
Absolutely. Federalists like me believe that a strong federal government is necessary to provide consistent regulations and oversight across the nation. The framers of our Constitution recognized that individual states could have varying laws, leading to confusion and potential loopholes. A federal approach ensures uniformity while respecting the Second Amendment.
So the Second Amendment is talked about a lot recently. So Ronnie, your perspective on federal government involve what?
Well, we anti-federalists are concerned that a strong federal government can become too powerful and infringe upon our liberties. We believe that in local control and that states should have the authority to set their own firearms regulations. This allows for flexibility that can better reflect the unique needs and values of each state.
Now, let's take a moment to explore the global context of gun control. So Pat, how do Federalists view gun control in relation to other countries?
That's an interesting point, Shaheer. Federalists often look to other countries as examples of how well-regulated gun control can lead to reduced gun violence. We see nations with strict regulations and lower gun ownership rates as models to consider when crafting policies to enhance public safety.
Ronnie, what's your perspective on international comparisons?
While other countries may have different approaches, we anti-federalists believe that America's unique history and culture must be taken into account. We can't simply adopt policies from other nations without considering our own context, including our deeply rooted tradition of gun ownership.
Now, as we approach the conclusion of this episode and debate, it's evident that the gun control debate is multifaceted and deeply rooted in American history. Pat, any final thoughts?
I want to emphasize the importance of finding common ground and continuing this dialogue. Our nation's strength lies in its ability to navigate complex issues like gun control while preserving our fundamental principles.
And Ronnie, any of your final thoughts?
The discussion on gun control should always be framed within the context of individual liberties and the potential for government overreach. We must remain vigilant in protecting our liberties while seeking solutions to address the legitimate concerns about public safety.
Very well said, both of you. Thank you, Pat and Ronnie, once again for your insightful contributions to this extended episode of The Great Debate. And to our listeners, remember that understanding both sides of complex issues like gun control is crucial to a thriving democracy. We will be back with more thoughtful, thought-provoking discussions on the next episode. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep the conversation going. Goodbye for now.